Resiliency? Resilience?
Resiliency. Resiliency.
Resiliency.
Let me get up our show notes. I wanna
I'm
sort of
gonna
take a
fumble over that word.
really?
Resiliency. I'm gonna have to be
You
resilient about
oh,
saying the word
you
resiliency.
took it away from me. I was
Oh,
gonna go
sorry.
there. I was gonna go I was absolutely gonna go there. Entry music. Da, 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 da. It's the Bob and Josh Show.
As you can tell from that intro, we're talking about resiliency. I'm gonna do my darndest not to fumble that word. It's one of those tricky things. It's hard to define, but everybody kind of understands what it is. First, we talk about what it is. Then we work through different ways that you can acquire more resiliency or help others acquire more of it. Make sure you hang out until the very end and find out what super famous, super well loved Christmas movie the Grinch that we call Bob hates. Yeah, you'll be surprised. Before we go to the episode, are you watching this on YouTube? Did you know you can? Yeah, we now publish every episode on YouTube. There will be links in the description. And oh, by the way, if you want to see it even more real time, we now stream every recording session of every episode. So get in, be a part of the conversation, watch us, laugh at us, whatever you enjoy about the Metacast. We look forward to connecting with you. Enjoy the episode.
Let's define it. What do we think is resiliency? When you like as characteristics of or aspects of it to you, like how would you know it if you see it in yourself or in others?
The hard part I have with that is I'm sure there's a more classic definition, but in my brain, I view it as my stubborn, hard-headed way of the world of I'm not going to let anything stop me from getting to where I think this project, myself, a team, whatever should be, and not allowing myself to let those thoughts creep in of maybe this isn't going to work and keep driving. But I feel like that's a very hard-headed approach and potentially
No,
dangerous, right? Because
no,
you
no, no.
because you
Hold it. This
might
is
not. No, I let
th-
me hold on, dirty dog. And do you go too far, right? Do you not know when to quit? Right? Like I go back to Teradata.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
could see that. But
So
what I was going to
hey,
say is, let's be our definitions. We're not academics. We're not trying to define it for the Harvard Review.
yeah,
It's for the Metacast.
yeah. Okay.
Embrace your definition. I agree with what you added to it.
Mhm.
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking persistence. Or when I threw it out before you started talking, I was thinking dogged persistence, which is sort of what you were like persist through things, be dogged, not take no for an answer. And I see some of that. So that's part of my definition as well. Another thing I might add is mope for short periods of time. I don't get mopey for long period. I do mope, as
Mhm.
you well know, Josh. Right? I wallow in self pity or I mope but for short periods of time. Then I sort of mentally pick myself up by my. I almost visually pick myself up by my bootstraps, right? Or by my suspenders or whatever.
Yeah.
Slap myself. I almost have a ceremony where it's like, come on, get a hold of yourself. Let's keep going. But allowing myself to mope a little bit. I think sometimes part of the self care aspect of it is allowing yourself to sort of get it out of your system, is maybe
Mhm.
part of resiliency. Because I don't think, I think if you don't take a break or if you don't allow it to settle and then move on, you can burn out or you can get crispy or something like that. Any other
Another
aspects to go ahead?
just a thing that I think helps with that, and I've seen it in action and I've seen it work very well, is having a safe venting partner.
Ah,
There were a
yeah.
couple folks at the Dude where our architect would just get over the edge, fired up, and just we're like, okay, you need to leave the building. But Richard Core, the scrum master, was a really good friend of his, and he'd be like, Josh, I got it. And they would go to lunch, and the architect would vent, and he just needed to get it out. And he needed a friend that could hear it, say, okay, you're right, or no, you're full of shit, whatever it might have been, to just let him get that out and not hold
Yeah.
it in. Different people are different. There are folks that need to get it out. So if you're that, having a safe partner to do that with, and it's tricky because one of the challenges that could create for that other person is you end up putting all of your problems on them, and can they handle that? Is that fair to them? All of those things, but there's gonna be that special person that can hear it, work through it with you, and then just toss it out of the brain, and they can keep moving forward with the stuff that they have. So that's another thing that I've seen work very well for people to get through those tough times.
I think there's as you were talking, I think that I'm reacting with or thinking that there's 2 sides to that. There's the direct I can vent to someone, a partner. I'm gonna use our relationship. I actually get re-energized or my resiliency rises just hanging out with you, and you
Mhm.
don't know it. So I may be having a tough time, and just hanging out with my buddy
Yeah.
and having some positive energy re-energizes me. So I've actually had 2 modes with you. We can have a discussion about it, and I'm venting with you and you're helping, but there's also just hanging don't let this go to your head, but then there's just hanging out with you,
Yeah.
and it re-energizes me, and you don't even know it, but it really does. Or I might vent about something else and it just
Mhm.
helps me build my resiliency battery. Maybe that's a metaphor. I talk about an energy battery when I talk about self-care. Maybe a good mental model or a metaphor is to think of like, where is my resiliency? Where is it at now? Is it low? Is it moderate? And is
Mhm.
it high? And maybe building the battery up when you don't need it. Like maybe a good pattern is build it up
Mm.
so that you can have it when you need it to help you, but not let it get too low so that you get hit between the eyes too quickly. What do you think about that metaphor?
I'm just thinking through in the way my brain works. I'm not sure. Maybe it would. I just never thought of it like that. I just don't see my brain having these like reserves that help me be ready for the next time I get knocked down. Maybe I'm thinking about it differently. But like there's things I do and books I read that I think end up doing that, where they end up setting me up for when that time comes that I've got another I think it's another tool in the tool belt for me. I think that's the visualization that I have is how can I be ready for next time? And it's like, hey, I need another weapon
Yeah.
as opposed to some more juice.
Well,
Again,
think of it as
we're
a
all different.
reservoir. But I mean, think about so for me in teaching, for example, as an introvert, I can feel it when I haven't recharged my battery at the end of a day. So if I'm teaching a
Yeah.
4-day class and I've gone out for drinks or something with the class afterwards, the next day I still can perform fairly well, but I feel internally I have to push myself because I feel internally that I've run myself a little bit low. And I think the same thing might apply, I don't know, with resiliency, right? That so my ability to bounce
Yeah.
maybe it's the bounce back factor. Like how long does it take to bounce back? I just thought I'd throw that out there. I'm still munging on it myself.
And I think that's part of the whole self-care thing is to make sure that you're ready, you're at peak performance. Those words are very strong for when something goes sideways
Yeah.
as opposed to being drained. And I was out last night or I haven't been doing what I normally do, stuff like that. Definitely to your point, I think maybe it's a two-piece thing where there's the energy to have what you need to bounce back. And then there's the tools and capability to use the energy in a positive direction to make
Yeah.
that turn. So it's probably you have to invest in both to make sure that you're ready whenever that happens because otherwise you might be out of balance and you'll be trying your hardest and maybe you haven't learned the tools and
Yeah.
techniques you need to bounce back and through things.
I wanna go back to something you said. You used, Teradata in your conversation earlier, and I think there may be a case where you're overly resilient. You
Mm.
didn't say it quite that way, but I wanted to circle back and bring that up. As I'm thinking about this topic, it's not just increase your resiliency, but am I being overly resilient? Right? Am I taking too much? Am I right? Should I pivot? Or, so
Yeah.
should I stay or should I go? And or stop and go or pivot or whatever. I think that's actually part of the resiliency toolkit is to look yourself in the mirror and make sure you're not being overly it sounds odd, but overly resilient. Um,
Uh, yeah, I didn't figure that out until that moment. So I was, let's see, that would have been, I was 35 at the time when I figured that out. I had just doggedly backed up and kept running into the same wall. Do it again, do it
yeah,
again, do it again. For all of my career. So for a decade prior to that, that's just what I did. And I never allowed myself the time or space to like hit the pause button and say, okay, how much energy are you putting into this? And is it
yeah,
getting returned? And that's where I got was I felt like I was expending so much energy to get this little bit of change out within that organization. And it felt like it wasn't worth it because we had made such great strides and now we were at sort of the tail end and it's like, well, yes, we can make it better, but it's going to require so much effort and energy. Let me go focus that energy somewhere else where I can have a greater
yeah,
impact. Whereas you had more experience and you saw that sooner than I did. And you were able to recognize, oh gosh, yes, we can fix this, but it's going to take a lot and it's not worth the time and energy and hair you're going to pull out.
yeah. One of the things is, as we're talking, I'm thinking about the persona. So we're talking about personal resilience, but then I think of the role that you're in and leadership resilience. So let's go back to Teradata. I'm going to put some words in your mouth, and then you can
Mhm.
just react. But I think part of your stickiness at Teradata, you weren't an individual contributor. You were a leader
Right.
at Teradata. I think there's persona resilience or role resilience too. There's an aspect to it where here's my personal resilience, but I'm leading a team of 50 people or 20, whatever it is. I need to show resilience for the team. I need to be resilient for the team. So I may be personally resilient at one level, but then I need to be maybe like using the battery excessively or whatever in order to show up as a leader or have expectations of that. And because people are feeding off of you as a leader, I think I feed off of my leaders' resilience to some
Yeah.
degree. Like theirs becomes mine. Talk about the leader. I'm trying to tee it up for the leadership aspect. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've been wrestling with that for the past 5 minutes of how can you infuse resilience within your organization? And I haven't been able to come up with anything other than just modeling resilience when it happens. And things that I found is people respond well when something goes wrong and you're resilient, but you're calm about it. That then gives them the same calm. Whereas if you get reactive and start to flare up, then you're going to start to show the organization that one, can I handle this? And B, should I be acting that same way? Should I be freaking out? I'm not sure. Maybe you have thoughts or someone in the chat has different ideas of how to infuse that resilience within a group of people that you're leading beyond just doing it. I don't know if there's any tricks or anything there.
I think you hit a highlight. I think it's the doing it. And a lot of leaders don't. So it's the question of, do you run the pressure's on? Do you succumb to the pressure as a leader, or are you the anchor for your team? There's two extremes there. Are you running around, or are you the calm anchor no matter what's happening?
Yeah.
And I think if you're running around, then the team may have resilience, but you're going to erode it. They're going to your modeling matters to the team.
Yeah.
What you're modeling matters. You're setting the culture up. You're setting the ecosystem up by your role model. I People have told me that one of my superpowers is I'm calm under pressure.
Yeah.
Now, if someone worked with me 30 years ago, when occasionally I would blow up and throw things as a leader, they would have never said that, right? So I've grown in that, so the pressure has made me calm, or maybe my age or whatever. But then that sets the tone for the resilience of the organization. Now, if I run my back, going back to that battery metaphor or whatever, if I run that too low, yes, I'm still calm, but I'm burning myself out to try to stay
Yeah.
calm. So the personal, I think there's a relationship between my leadership demeanor and that personal battery. But yeah, I don't know if there's any tools. Now, I do think people can learn that. So let's say there's the young Bob Galen out there in the team who doesn't have organizational resilience. And I remember once I threw my own Walkman. I threw it across a room
Oh,
into a
wow.
wall. A Walkman. Does that tell you the time frame, Josh?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I took this Walkman and I ripped it off my hand. I threw it across the room, and it just shattered in the wall. Yeah, that was a non-resilient moment. But I think you can, that I think people are evolving. That role model, you're leading by example. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That the example can lead people there, and they're
Yeah.
not really. It's not like a resilience class. I'm going to throw that out there. I don't think you have a class 101 on building or undermining your resilience. I think it's one of those softer attributes that's developed over time.
Two things. One, I think there might be a tool, but most importantly, were you able to save the cassette after the Walkman was destroyed
No,
or
no,
everything was shattered to
everything
pieces?
was shattered.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was not a fine leadership moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't by myself.
Oh,
I there.
no. You were modeling behavior?
I was modeling the wrong behavior.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think a tool is agile. I think the process, not, I'm going to take, I think the process of agile creates organizational resilience because you're able to pivot and make the changes that are need to stay on
Oh,
course, as
okay.
opposed to some of the other methods where you just keep going through that death march. There's nothing resilient about a death march. Maybe you think you're resilient because you're just going to ride this thing to the end and you're going to ship it.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
doesn't build a resilient organization because people start to dread things. Whereas as you implement an agile mindset and show that we're going to be resilient to all of the changes that are happening, and here's how we're going to adjust, I think that's another way to model the behavior so that your organization sees and feels that, hey, no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. We're going to figure it out. And Agile supports that capability for modeling that more often, I think would be a good way to think of it.
As you were saying that, and I love where you're going. I was thinking of the 5 Scrum values, and I don't know if I can articulate all of them, but courage is one, respect is another, is it transparency is another, prioritization or focus is another, and then I think of this notion of pivoting, right? Continuous improvement, continuous reflection. I agree with you. I didn't think about it as we went into this episode, but I think if you're practicing those things, they're resilience builders as
Yeah.
opposed to resilience eroders.
Yeah.
I don't know how resilient you'll become, but I think they increase whatever resilience you have. They can potentially build it up.
Well,
That's a
and
really
you
good
would
point.
argue that Agile was created to provide resilience in a dynamic world
Yeah.
where things are always changing and you don't get caught in that cost of change curve that we all, well, maybe people that didn't work back when we worked never saw that change curve. But okay, so yes, the actual thing we should do is pivot. Let's abandon this project or whatever the right answer is. Whereas before it was like, we are marching and we're going to make this happen.
Well, I like the death march. I literally have been a part of death marches. I've read
Mm,
the book. I've read Jordan's book, Death March. There is a book. I don't know if you've ever read it, where he defines it and explores it. That must have been a depressing writing endeavor for
yeah.
him to
Yeah.
do that. But it's really a counterpoint to what is not resilient, right?
Yeah.
Is the essence of a death march is a non-resilient activity. It does not want to deal with that at all. It's just trying to it's sort of break you down to the ground
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So knowing what it's not it kind of could be useful for the Metacasters as well to explore that. Anything else on resilience? What do you think?
No,
Coaches? I
it's
think roles. I go ahead.
just trying to think of origin stories of resiliency and where that comes from. Is it just Modeling is the only thing that we've really come up with of how you can try and infuse that within your organization. So is it that you see resilience growing up and you model yourself after that, or from a coach, a work, a boss, whatever it is? I think that's it. I think you have to see it, or maybe you just naturally have it. Just trying to understand how to help folks that are out there that are thinking, "Gosh, I'd probably like to be more resilient. What can I do?"
I think
There's
it tightly couples we talked about it as I'm thinking about it. I think it tightly couples to self-care. It's
Oh,
not the
okay.
same thing, but going out for a walk and if walking in nature makes you feel better than if you're in a death march. I'm just pulling an example out of thin air, then going out for a walk or buying a puppy named River and playing with a puppy and getting that energy, or reading a science fiction book or whatever it is. Self-care kinds of things, I think, help build your resilience. Meditation, I think, if you meditate, journaling, if private anything personal reflection. I think you've been getting more reflective, Josh, if I sense it, not journaling,
Yeah.
but over the last 10 years, if I have not done this, I'm actually doing it in real time. But if I think back on our interactions and I think about it today, you've I think you've gotten more reflective over time, which is probably I think that might stuff like that might build your resilience muscles.
Yeah, in response to Steven in the chat, yes, there's a ton of sports references that are out there, and
Rub
those
rub some dirt in it.
yeah,
Exactly.
those are visualizations that certainly fueled, like, you go back to the Rocky movies and things like that. That is resilience in a bunch of directions. So for me, the television did a lot of the raising of Josh. So it was certain characters that I liked and I wanted to model myself after and be like that. And they all were those that would not give up. So that's an origin story for me as I built that up over time. And what I found recently is, in my reflection, Robert, is that the thing that refuels me the fastest is watching, seeing something be created. So YouTube has been a thing for me where there's all kinds of creators that are out there that have a 15-minute video of them building something, and that their passion and enthusiasm for building the thing and the pride that they have, that turns my little flame into a bonfire, and I'm like, "All right, let's go, let's do this." That's the thing that I found, that I just am starting to build a playlist of those that I can just put on the TV, and I can turn around and see that and just be like, "Wow, that's freaking awesome." That's the thing that I found that works for me as of right now in 2022, or the end of it.
So you intrigued me with your child of TV. So I don't remember the character's name, but Bruce Willis in Die Hard,
Oh,
is
yeah.
that a I is that a
I didn't
resilient
see him until later, so it would have been, like, young, like, I was introduced to, like, the Lone Ranger very early, and
The Lone
Batman, of
Ranger?
course. Yeah, the Lone Ranger. So, it was always, like, those lonely rangers. It really was, like, those are the ones that I've always liked, is the ones that are out and on their own doing the right thing because it's the right thing, and that's how I've modeled, and, like, they never gave up, but the odds are always stacked against them, so those are the characters that I've always liked and said, "Oh, like, that's how I wanna be." So,
Who's that
yeah.
what's that Stephen King no, is it Stephen King? There's the, gunslinger in
Oh,
one
yeah, I never read it, and they made a
they
series
made
or a
a
movie out
movie
of it.
they made a
Yeah,
movie out of it. That's that
yeah.
lone gunslinger. I forget the
Gosh, I guess I
character.
should watch it then.
Oh, no, it's pretty interesting, it's pretty compelling,
Okay.
and a more modern day view. I wonder if we've explored the topic enough. I'm feeling like we've run the end of
Yeah,
our
yeah.
art. Yeah,
Yeah,
anything else?
I don't think so. I feel pretty good.
I'm just thinking a second. I do think it's an intangible thing, maybe to wrap it up, and
Yeah.
it's really inside out, it's intangible. Find role models. I do think maybe the key tool is, and it's a dual tool, is talk to people or find your metaphors, and maybe do both of those things. Find your resiliency building metaphors, movies, videos, or whatnot, but also don't don't just look at don't just look at them. Find someone who does it for you.
Yeah, that another thing that's been helpful for me is, and Steven's gonna laugh at me, and he'll know why. I've learned more about stoicism and
Oh,
what that
no,
is. What?
Steven's not gonna laugh at you. I No, no, go
Oh,
ahead. Please share.
and I've been reading and studying about that more because that fits with where I'd like to live, but it is a lot of resiliency and as a leader, setting yourself up, doing the self-care, doing all those things so that when something difficult happens, you're in a good position. So there's a handful of books by Ryan Holiday that I've been reading and studying, and I now have spread throughout the house so my kids stumble upon them.
So we'll have to have a stoicism, and you'll have to lead it episode at one point.
Yeah.
And really, I know a guy in Europe who's a stoic. He's an agile coach, a stoic agile coach. I don't know much about his style. I like his style, but
Yeah.
I haven't done a deep dive into what stoicism is. So maybe we could do
Yeah.
like an
Happy
intro
to.
or
Yeah.
and how it can apply. I
Yeah.
want to come back to the role thing as a way of ending the episode. And I think there are certain roles in our space where you have to be building, think of it as muscles. And I want to encourage the Medicast to go out there and start working out and building their resiliency muscles. Two roles that really come to one we explored was leadership. I do think to be an effective agile leader, you have to be resilient. You have to be working on that, not just for yourself, but for your teams because they're going to feed off of you. I think as a coach, I see so many coaches that are just burned out. They're like, oh, they're just the organizations have sucked the resiliency out of them, right? Or the lack of progress or whatever, and they need to work on it as well. So I think you need to work on that resiliency from a leadership perspective for your teams, from a coaching perspective for your clients. Otherwise, change roles or something. So maybe it goes back to that pivoting point. If you find that your battery is too low, maybe that's an indicator that it's not you. You have to go to another place to start building that resiliency elsewhere. How react to that, Josh? I don't wanna have the last word, but
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking, is that a mental gate you can put in place for yourself where if you're thinking about, do I want to step into one of these roles, understand the resilience that's required?
I
And do you have that? And are your batteries charged? Is your
d
tool belt broad
yeah,
enough that you can handle that? I think that's something that people underestimate as a challenge when they move into a larger role with more responsibility. Is the responsibility isn't just, hey, now this project is my responsibility. It's now
right,
your responsibility as a leader and the resiliency that you have to show, knowing that a decision that you make, not everybody's going to be happy, not everybody's going to
yep,
like it. How are you going to
yep.
handle that? Or you're going to get your budget cut. What are you going to do? How are you going to coach and handle people? There's a ton of resiliency things that just show up all of a sudden when maybe you move into a different role. And can you check yourself and say, hey, am I ready for this? And I think that's something that often people overlook or they aren't coached well enough on of, hey, you have the tools that you need to be successful? And if not, how can we help you get them so that you're ready and successful?
I agree. I'm gonna say it's not even it's a gate. It's a thinking gate, but I don't know if you have to reject yourself. So, for example, if I was a leader and my resiliency was low or lower, maybe you enter the company, go for it, but you ask Josh to be your mentor or coach. Or you
Mhm.
find that you line up some trusted partners. You go immediately, you recognize that, and you line up help, you line up coaching. I
Yeah.
still find I do leadership coaching, and I still find it's probably a stigma that people do not like to ask for help. There's a negative stigma associated with it in leaders. There's this view that I should have all of the tools and capabilities inside myself. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help to help. Yeah. So reach out to folks and line them up and then go take that opportunity and be
Yeah.
working on your muscles along the way.
Good point. Yeah. Yep,
Hey,
stretch.
are we good?
We're good.
All right. So from beautiful downtown Cary, North Carolina,
And beautiful downtown Fuquay Arena, North Carolina.
Bob Galen,
And I'm Josh Anderson.
Shake.
And bake.
Oh, Josh,
Yeah.
in my class they were talking about the movie, um, and there was consensus that no one. What's the Will Ferrell movie?
Talladega Nights.
Talladega Nights,
Yeah.
and it was this groundswell from my Cal class of hatred towards Talladega. I know. It just I don't know where it came out of, but it's like, have you seen it? Oh, I couldn't. I had to, I had to walk away, and it was just, and I had to bring up that it is our closing tagline. But you
Yeah.
remember when I didn't want to watch it, right? Do you
I
remember
know. I
that?
know. I know. Yes.
It was the first few years we were shaking and baking, and I didn't know what the hell it meant, and then I sat through it, and I still don't like Will Ferrell, but it's not a bad movie.
You don't,
I still don't.
I don't understand how you don't like Will Ferrell. Like what?
I struggle with what? One word, elf?
Okay, so people make bad choices, but
Elf?
there are people that like love that movie.
I
Yeah.
know.